Hello, my name is Olurotimi Usha. Sorry, I had technology issues. So I'm continuing with my discussion on, America's impending exit from the Middle East. I was just talking about how um, America is very blessed in terms of its, its regional expanse and the diversity of its terrain, the richness of its natural resources. I talked about how we actually have the largest reserves of gas, right, natural gas in the world, over 1 quadrillion cubic meters, right? Over 1 quadrillion cubic meters of natural gas. I don't know if what I called it, but yeah, over 1 quadrillion of cubic uh, meters of natural gas available in reserves. And then, our oil, majority of our oil comes from Canada. Over 62% of our oil comes from Canada anyway. We only get roughly 5% of oil from the Middle East. The Middle East has been a quagmire, right? It's been a powder keg for the United States. And now, the geopolitics have changed. We're no longer in a Cold War. The rising power is China and Asia, and they control that region. So there's no real need for us to be there. I see, more conciliatory moves, more increasing realignment, right, between the Middle East and Asia and possibly China, right? And but it's just not a place that America needs to be in. America needs to focus its resources on developing America, right? Our vast territory, right? We still have so much land, right? America's we have over 97% of our land, right? Rural areas. Only roughly about 3% of our land has been urbanized. Meanwhile, 80% of Americans are cosmopolitan. So we still have very untapped, unused land. Our land has not been fully exploited, our resources, and we need to focus on that instead of expending so much in a powder keg. The Middle East has just been a quagmire for America, right? Now, I was talking about, many. So I was listening to a scholar on the podcast of Rory Stewart and Alistair Campbell. They're British, right? And this person seemed to be saying, well, that 80% of Iranians don't want the Revolutionary Guard in power. They want something different. Well, that's left to the Iranians to fix that, to handle that. What has that got to do with America, right? America should not be, American troops can't be a mercenary guard, mercenary force for for foreign nations, right? That's up to for those foreign nations to do that, especially particularly Iranians. Iranians have been in politics far longer than Americans, and Iranians probably, if there's anything like DNA or whatever, well, that's the site, the center, the epicenter of the great Persian Empire, the Achaemenid Empire. They've ruled the most population of the world, right? More people than any more proportion of the world population than any other nation, any other empire, right? They're in the Guinness Book of World Records. The Achaemenids under Cyrus the Great, they ruled almost half of the existing world population at that time, right? In the sixth century BC. No other empire has done that, right? Has ever ruled almost half of the world global population, right? So they're experts. They have the ability, to engineer or do whatever internal uprising that they need to. That's not for American troops to go and risk American lives, American economy. It's just, again, it would be America's Waterloo and America's undoing. That's what it's proving to be. And now, um, and the other thing is that I noticed that the Iranians in the West, Iranians, this person, it sounded like he was born in Iran, right? The scholar, the Iranians in the West, right? They, like in America, right? Only roughly 500,000 Iranians are in America, 500,000 to 750,000, right? The population of Iran is 93 million. That's roughly 0.05%, not even up to 1%, right? So their reflections, whatever it is they're saying, they talked about how Iranians were celebrating in the streets when there was the decapitation of their leadership in Iran, and they were celebrating in Los Angeles. Yes, that's probably the crowd that supports Pahlavi, right? A small section of the population of Iran, right? They don't, it's a distortion, it's a misrepresentation to say the whole of Iran, right, is against the Guard, right, or supports the Pahlavis. The Pahlavis, by the way, were not so popular, right? They were not so popular. We don't even know the complexity, because the Pahlavis did not even come from they were not aristocrats. Iranians have had aristocrats for a long time. Mossadegh, right, was an aristocrat. He was a descendant of a Shah. He was a descendant of kings. Pahlavi had been a servant. He was an orphan guy. Reza Pahlavi was a plant. He was illiterate. He didn't even go have an education. Fortunately, he was natively intelligent, but he was a plant of the British. He was Field Marshal. It was Field Marshal Ironside who selected him. He had prowess he displayed great skill in the use of the machine gun, and he basically made him a brigadier general. The British sponsored his coup to overthrow the Khaja Shahs. Was it Ahmad Shah Khaja that was there? They overthrew him. He was weak. He was, and they overthrew him, and Reza Shah was supposed to impose stability in Iran. And of course, Iranians have this, I think it's just part of their constitution, right, to assert the independence of Iran, because this was what Reza Shah, who had been basically, um, uh, you know, maneuvered by, helped by, or handpicked by the British. And here he was also asserting his independence. He built a strong military force, and he was trying to, the Iranian nationalism was coming out in him again. Before his son, he had initially tried to challenge. He unilaterally at some point abrogated the concession agreement, the oil concession agreement that Iranians had with, what was his name, William Knox Darcy, which was sold to the British, and British took 51% of that company, Anglo-Persian oil company, right? He wanted a better deal than the 16%. He was the one who first unilaterally did something about it. Imagine, so Iranian independence, autonomy, assertiveness always comes out. When I talk about Iranian independence, by the way, uh, again, I was in the earlier video, the first part of the video, I talked about how uh, Iran, land of the Aryans. Aryan actually means noble. So you can see there's that inherent desire, uh, constitution to assert the dignity, to be assertive, to be autonomous. Not in an aggressive way, because again, I know many Iranians, and understand the psychology of the people. All Iranians that I know, not trying to stereotype or project a trope, but again, there's a psychology of the people. There's a zeitgeist, and individuals have their right, their raison d'être, right, a reason for existence, what defines them, and you automatically notice this quiet confidence, quiet dignity of an Iranian, right? There's a quiet confidence, quiet dignity. Um, you know, it's intrepid, but it's not aggressive. It's not the unmoored, blustering, insecure type that that you see many people have. Many other people have this unmoored insecurity that they want to project as confidence, right? They're insecure, really. So that's assertiveness, autonomy, independence, not to be bullied, not to be a stooge, not to be a puppet, right? You see it, it's inherently Iranian. So you see the Pahlavis who were supposed to be stooges to the West. I watched the videos of Muhammad Reza Pahlavi when he was being interviewed in the 70s by Mike Wallace, and he said it that, you could see the criticisms from Mike Wallace. It was obvious that he wasn't doing what he was expected to be doing, what the West or whoever expected him to be doing, cow tying and be a lapdog. And he said it that they're dissatisfied with him in the West because he refuses to be a stooge. And in 1973, he did nationalize the resources of Iran. So this was somebody who was supposed to be their stooge. He nationalized the resources of Iran, the very thing that his prime minister was overthrown for. That's Mossadegh was overthrown for in 1953. We haven't thought about the implications. And we ignore it. We've overlooked the implications of the West having taken a minority who was not Persian, who doesn't have royal ancestry, who was actually a servant, right? He was actually a servant. That's Reza Shah. He was actually a servant. He didn't come from any of the aristocratic. He didn't have an aristocratic background. He had actually been a servant of the Dutch, been a servant of people. He was an illiterate, right? How do Iranians view this person? Are they accepted? Is the Pahlavi dynasty accepted? That was foisted on Iranians by the West. Are they accepted as truly representative of the Iranian kings that were known as the Shah and Shah? That's King of Kings, right? Do they have that genuine acceptance? Obviously, they created their own patronage system. They created their own loyalists, and apparently, maybe most of the people, or not a not insignificant number of those who fled to the West, to America, they probably represent this group of loyalists, right, to the Shahs, right, that received patronage from the Shahs, right, and they're not reflective of the mostly rural, right, mostly rural Iranians that are still living in the lands, living in Iran, who probably identify more with the clerics, with the ayatollahs, right? So this is something that the West doesn't think about, at least America, when we just keep seeking ways to, America just keeps seeking ways to impose or institute some kind of puppet, right? That in the Middle East, right? So and it doesn't tend to work, right? So again, Iranians in America, they're 0.5%, less than 1% of the population of Iranians, Iranians, and they clearly, being a sliver of the population, right? They clearly are not a representation of the in fact the heterogeneous Iranian population, right? They are probably more closer to being a distortion of the perspective and the desires of, they don't properly reflect the desires of the proud people of, probably proud people still living in Iran, right? Who refuse to have their leaders be puppets of the West, rather than reflect the dignity, the independence, and the assertiveness, and the future of of Iranians, right? Generally, and I'm not speaking for Iranians, but again, it's just from this is from analysis, right? Um, so hopefully we can get out immediately. So Rory Stewart, I think, they're saying that, well, that America now has an obligation not to hold, not to allow Iran think they can hold the world hostage the way they've manipulated oil prices and adversely affected the economy um, through their blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, right? Well, we always knew that they had the ability to do that, right? They said they would, they said they could. And as I was saying, they've done it before. They did it in the 70s, right? It's something that until, the West, if the West doesn't want to be held hostage to to Middle East, to Middle Eastern nations, right, uh, via their control of oil, of access to oil, then the West needs to learn to wean itself off oil, right, and focus on renewables, other sources of energy, other more technological, more innovative sources of energy, right? That has nothing to do with America. America, we have our sources of energy. We can actually be self-sustaining in our region, in the Western Hemisphere. Fortunately, we can develop, we can deepen our relationship with Venezuela, which has vastly the largest reserves of oil in the world. If we continue to consume oil as we do, you know, Venezuela is there, Canada is there, so we don't need to have the headache of the Middle East, the Middle East again, right? We don't need to be bogged down by that. By the powder keg over there, right? That's something that Europe can deal with, right? If they want to be beholden to Middle Eastern oil. Anyway, I'm stopping this video here, and I'll keep you posted. Thank you.